How's everyone doing today? It's again that time of the week. It's time for Geek Speak. And today we are going to be talking about the 5 things that you should know about Search Console. And with me, of course, introduce myself. My name is Phelan. I work at Seymour Digital Media, where we focus on search engine marketing.
And I'm Rena from Little Works Indie Media, and I have a digital marketing company in Vancouver.
Awesome. Uh, Looks like our stream is coming through. Okay, that's good. Just making sure before we push too much further. And so today we are talking about Search Console. So I guess as a quick primer, we'll start with like what even is Search Console. And so at its basic, it's a free tool from Google that once you verify that you own a domain, they'll tell you what's going on with your website in relation to how it shows up in search. So
Yeah.
used to be called Webmaster, Google Webmaster, and then they wanted to kind of make it more user friendly and make it more accessible to anyone, and so they rebranded it Search Console. And it basically, yeah, just lets you know about the performance of your website on a bunch of different axes. So one of the big ones of why we like it is kind of what I said right there was about the performance. So it's like if you have errors or all of a sudden like a bunch of pages that are like not should be ranking, they'll let you know in the coverage tab like, hey, this page is 404ing. I don't think it's supposed to, and
Yeah.
then you can go and fix it. So it definitely is really helpful for people to just know what's breaking, as well as like areas of improvement as well.
Yeah. So what's great about it, what I find great about it, and what step number one is to get your email attached to your search console. So if you're a business owner and somebody else is organizing your website for you, ask them to add you to search console and you'll know you're added to it because you'll get monthly updates on your performance. And those can actually give you a really good initial idea of where to go um, with your blogging strategy, for example. And again, if there are any errors, some of them are not really, they're not, you don't have to fix everything. Some of them are just indicators that there could be issues. They're not necessarily issues, but you can run that past your developer or take a peek yourself and see what needs actually fixing. So
Yeah,
that's the first step is getting attached and getting those notifications.
yeah, definitely. It's definitely it could be very surface level, but it can also be very deep. My
Yeah.
general rule of thumb is if it's red, if the symbol's red, that's bad. Fix that right away. If it's yellow, look into it. And like you said, if it's like part of a blogging strategy and they're like, hey, this isn't quite working, this page, then like, oh, because it's a cornerstone piece, I should really fix this. Um,
Yeah, so
right.
one of the things that comes up so much with the fix it things is your elements are too close together. And often I go in and I can see that it's actually not the case. It's just you want to make sure that your elements aren't too close together. Like if you're trying to push buttons, and I could try to get my finger in the camera here. If you're trying to push buttons and you can't because oh, I see I'm on the, it's like it's mirrored. It's so weird. Um, if you're trying to push buttons and it's too close to another element, sometimes you can't push that button.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's
Is
definitely
there
is
a
one
lag?
there is a bit of a lag. I'm also now being attacked by a
Oh,
cat.
how
Oh, and uh, so yeah, the just trying to. Okay, so perfect for the live of having our cat George decide that my lap is going to be where he's going to set up camp. Any hooser. Yeah, there's definitely yeah, the and that's one thing to keep in mind as well of mobile issues is most times I have so many false positives with that and like
yeah. That's
it's
that's exactly. So even if it turns out, yeah, if it turns out to be yellow and it's something like that, you can actually just use your own assessment tools, the brain in the head that
yeah.
says, no, this is actually easy to work with, so I don't have a problem here, because that's the one that comes up the most, and it's usually the one that um, clients get in touch with me the most.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely one where the it's one we've had a couple of clients do the same thing and I just, request, you know, check it again I've never had it. It pretty much always just goes away once you've requested to scan it again.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So the other one that I really like that we've been seeing more and more is you get to see multiple uh, kind of platforms. Is the best way I think of it. So like discovery has become huge, and so we've had clients that have had, tons of traffic from discovery, and when they put up blog posts and they're relevant to like something that's kind of newsworthy that's in a local area. So one lady was like doing a big book release that's all about this local area she was in, and so that picked up a bunch of traffic.
Yeah. So can we just actually go through and explain what discovery actually is?
Yeah, that's how would I put it? It's kind of it's like Google's answer to like a Facebook feed. It's kind of the best way to describe it, where they aggregate it based on interests.
Right. Okay. That's where we're going. Yeah. So basically, it's when Google serves up your page, post, whatever it is, to other people based on interest. It's a lot like the discovery section in Instagram, if you're familiar with that. So, so it's a nice way. It's an additional way from just doing search that your content can come up
Yeah,
and be served up to new people that are not necessarily looking for you in particular, but might be good clients or good viewers of your content.
yeah, exactly. And it's also an option as well for Google Ads. You can do targeting for the discovery feed as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so I just wanted to put that out there as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely it's kind of yeah, it's very much an interest feed. It kind of reminds me a little bit of like an RSS feed where it's like as people post content and it's just like Google's doing a bit more of their Google, customization and personalization. And so they're, kind of feeding you stuff like of course I've got a lot of SEO stuff that comes up on mine because there's always news in that department. So yeah, so there's stuff like that, and it's definitely it's becoming bigger, especially, and it's something that's going to be very common if you are an Android user. You're going to know for sure that it's what it is because it's pretty pronounced. It's one of the home screens.
Okay, I didn't know that. I don't have an Android. I'd like to maybe you could do a screen cap and put it into the comment section so we can see it.
Yeah, okay. I can try to figure out how to do that, but yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's definitely a big one that it's an exciting prospect for a lot of people as well. That it's just new ways to get found and get people eyeballs on it, and um, there's no real good guidelines either on how to get in there. They don't
Mhm.
really make it very clear, and they haven't given a lot of guidance on it. So I can't
Right.
really help with any tips there. I'm still looking myself. Yeah, and so the other thing that we really, I think both of us agreed when we were kind of doing the prep and kind of making it outline, the thing we like about Google Search Console over, say, SEMrush or Moz or any of those tools is that it's from the horse's mouth. This is like
Yeah.
information that is, this is what Google is seeing about your website, not what another company thinks Google sees about your website. Like, this
Yes,
is,
that is so important. I just
yeah,
actually had I mean, Pip and I have even talked about this recently. I had a client send me a report, an SEO report. I think it was done on SEMrush, and and he was using that number and comparing it to the Google ranking that I gave him, and it causes a lot of confusion because the way that the metrics are organized not the same. So you can't just look at any old tool for your website. You need to be consistently looking at the same tool with your website to actually figure out how the measurement works. And I'm with you, Phelan. I like using it, whatever Google tools are available to do, to run reports and figure out where your standing is.
yeah.
SEM Rush and what was the other one?
AA Trust, that's the other
And
one.
Moz. Yeah, there are a
Yeah,
bunch of them. They use their own index, their own metric, their own metrics,
yeah.
and it's fine. It works over time if you're actually continually using it. But for one-off reports, not so helpful. In fact, it can be a real disadvantage to you because you have no idea where you are, because again, SEO is kind of like something that happens over time. It's really important to be consistent, but
Yeah.
also those things are also used as sales tools. And I want to
Yeah.
point this out because one thing that a lot of SEO companies do is they'll contact you, they'll cold call more so than other kinds of marketing. And you've probably gotten these awful calls. They say they're from Google, but they're not really from Google. And and they usually say that there's something wrong with your Google listings page, and so you want to find out what's wrong with it. But really, they're trying to sell you SEO services, and and other companies have done this too, where they'll offer a free report. I've got a free report. There's some problems with your website. I found some problem. So my clients will sometimes get these from other marketers who are trying to poach the client, and they'll send me the report. And it's actually quite hard to dismantle that report because you have to kind of like look at it in context, and you have to have the whole report. You can't just send screen caps of one aspect. It's like a person needs all of the information to digest it and figure out what's what. And then you also have to make sure that the reports are actually congruous with your goals. So if they're sending you a report that deals with, your 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 page speed is the only thing that they're concerned about, and you've been working on an on-page SEO strategy with your blogging, then those things aren't the speed page. The page speed test is not going to be particularly effective in understanding your overall SEO positioning and indexing on specific pages, because each page index separately, right? So it's not like
Yeah.
your site indexes by its pages. So you can't just say your whole site is at this level and then
Yeah.
have, it doesn't work that way. You need to actually look at each page individually. So what I'm getting at is be wary of anyone that gives you an audit, pay a free audit uh, and there's not that great of explanation in terms of what those things actually mean in comparison to your strategy that you're working on. Those things need to be congruent. So that's
Yeah.
that. And then they'll also, is this where we're going to drop the story time? Is this Rena's story time moment?
Yeah. Yeah. Go for it.
Okay. Okay. So the other thing that often happens is you'll get these phone calls, these cold calls. They won't offer you an audit, but they'll tell you that there are a whole bunch of problems with your website. And interestingly enough, these people aren't actually looking at your website. They're following a script, and they're outlining um, problems that are usually on people's websites, not specific to you. So I had, and I we know that this is a big sort of not truth. It's a lie. It's all a lie,
Yeah.
because for example, when you have a site that you're working on, and it's not launched yet, they will tell you that your site is terrible. I had that happen to a client of mine. She called me in a panic. What? How is Google finding the site? We talked about not having the site found. I'm like, the site is not found. These people are just hoodwinking you. What they do is they get lists of people's domains with their telephone numbers if you don't have Privacy Protect, and they just call based on the fact that they found a domain. And there's even one a service provider that I know, and he told me the funniest thing, that even one of his clients that owns a domain but doesn't have any site, nothing built whatsoever, not even a landing page or anything, and they get the exact same calls. So it's just another sales, I want to call it a sales technique, but that would be giving it way more credibility than I'd like. It's a
Yeah.
sales what? It's a sales
It feels
yeah.
more like a boiler room, to be honest. Like it's a fly by night operation that won't be there next week, and
Yeah.
it definitely. I mean, it's also you have to bear in mind the motivations of someone trying to cold call you and say that your website's broken.
Yeah.
It's they might have their own vested interest that may not be perfectly aligned with yours. So keep that in
Yes.
mind. Um, Speaking of which, you did mention something that I wanted to speak to that was really good. I had a situation where there was a website that needed to be launched at a very specific time for contractual reasons, and because of a sponsor, anyway, they it had to be this exact time, this exact day, could not show up beforehand, and Google had scanned it, and I got a panicked email from the
Oh
client
no.
saying, "Hey, could we do something about this?" Where it wasn't even on their proper domain; it was on a subdomain that I had, but it had, I guess,
Oh.
the keyword, and so it started ranking.
Oh
And
no.
so what you can do is go to the removals tab, and you could say, "I would like this temporarily taken off of Google." And
Yes.
so it's a very useful little tool
So
that I, yeah,
the removals tab is in console, correct?
yeah, it's one of the big ones. You can't miss
Yes.
it in there. There's only like 8 tabs I think in there, so
Yeah.
it's pretty straightforward to find it. It's not like hidden. It's not like Google Analytics where there's like layers upon layers the
Yeah.
menu's very light, and so yeah, it's definitely one of the big buttons that you're never. I This is the first time I've ever had to use removals, but now I know that if I ever need to take a website off the internet or off Google for a little bit, that's where I go.
Great. Yeah, that's great. Great tip. So that's another console bit.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
we've covered three of
Yeah.
our points. Five. Okay. So what's the next one?
The also you can do well, there's a section that's called enhancements, and then underneath of it, so say you're an e-commerce site, you then it should have underneath it enhancements. It should say products, and then again, kind of like how we talked about with like pages aren't working. They'll also tell you, hey, your like rich snippet isn't working for your product, which is super important for e-commerce, right?
So
Because
rich snippet is sometimes it's called a, is that the same
the
thing that's called the meta tag on
it
Yoast meta tag and snippet.
it
It's the part
it's
that
the
gets indexed.
schema. So it's the schema.
Yes.
So it's like a little bit of. So that one's kind of more the page title and meta
Okay.
description, and then what
Okay.
this one is more like it's a little bit of code, but most
Okay.
e-commerce sites out of the box should do this because when you go to do like free listings with Google Merchant Center, they're going to want to know all this metadata about it. So like there'll be
Right.
the name of the product, there'll be the price of the product, there'll be the image, there'll be what are the shipping rates, there'll be is it
Yeah.
available. So all these kind of metadata things, and Google will scan your website and go like, oh, looks like you have some products. Looks like your product metadata is like, again, they'll let you know if it's red or if it's yellow. That like, this
Mhm.
this super. There's certain things obviously like name, image, price. Those are going to be like critical.
Okay, so you can actually look at that stuff in console then.
Yeah.
Okay, because I've organized that with a client on their POS part of their website, their
Yeah.
uh, point of sale. So it's the product uh, inventory is put in through
Yeah.
this particular piece of software, and then it's linked up to the website. And so I've done it through that, but I've never actually looked at it through console. So that's great.
Yeah, and it's definitely one that your technical side, it definitely this just gives you an indicator if you're not like super proficient, but at least you can know, hey, reach out to your web developer and be like, hey, I saw this, could you take a look at it? And it's just a way as a business owner that you can double check things and just see if like maybe this is broken, why am I not showing up for when I have like my bullet journal doesn't show up when I go to look for it, and then you could find out like, oh, actually it's because we didn't set up the schema correctly, and then talk to your web developer.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, and most web developers are getting those. If they're connected to your console, which they should be, they would be getting those updates regularly. So a lot like reputable web developers will be keeping their eyes open for those things for you.
Yeah, yeah, and Search Console. Yeah, just you reminded me when you said that they do sometimes notify you of a problem had just come up, so they are proactive with a lot of these ones as well. So it's pretty
Yeah,
good that you'll
yeah,
be able
that's
to
what
see
I
like,
Yeah, so that's exactly right. So that's the first level of working with console is just getting those alerts in your inbox and then actioning them out and seeing what needs to be fixed and what is not really a false positive and having it re-scanned.
yeah,
Um, And then the second part is going in there and poking around
Yeah,
and
yeah,
finding the product section and seeing if that looks good, and you know, seeing they'll have a list of all of the errors that they've alerted you to in the past. If you haven't dealt with them, you'll find the list right there. Yeah, so that's the next step is
yeah,
logging
yeah,
in.
yeah, for sure. And then well, it gives you like an idea of where to look in there.
Yeah.
The other one, kind of the final one, is it's the security. So they this actually just came up for me in real life yesterday. I was talking to
Oh,
someone, and they said that they got a weird signal, a weird notification in Search Console, and then when we opened up, it was a big red thing said, "Your site is insecure, potential
oh,
malware." Yeah,
oh
it
no.
was. Oh, it was a big red bar
Oh,
at the
so
top.
console's doing that now. So you don't even, so I wonder how long is the problem on the website before console actually picks that up? That's really handy.
Yeah, they're pretty good about this. They've gotten a lot better over the years because they want to make sure everyone's secure going through the
Yeah.
internet. Um, they it turned out that the page was a 404. It wasn't even didn't exist. So we
Oh,
just
that's
submitted that.
funny.
Yeah, so it was definitely it was a very big scary notification. We went to the page and we went like, okay, is there anything happening here? No, it's a 404. It doesn't exist. And so we just told them this page doesn't actually exist anymore. And so they were validating that. And but
Yeah.
it's definitely one where you can. It's super helpful in case something does happen. That
Yeah.
Google's being proactive and letting you know, like, hey, this is not so good. Um, and also, I've had that experience where I had a client who sold custom jewelry, and
Mhm.
they were doing Google Ads, and then all of a sudden we couldn't do Google Ads because their site contained malware, and
Oh, yeah, no, yeah, no kidding.
yeah, so it was a very weird error, and so I had said no, that's not really because they were on Shopify, and I was like, no, Shopify's pretty good about this kind of stuff. Like,
Yeah, that's true. So what was
yeah.
it?
Well, what you had to do to fix it, it somehow a trigger happened, and I don't know what exactly it was, but what ended up being the solution is going to Search Console, going to that security tab, taking a big screenshot that said,
Oh,
and then
you're kidding.
showing I had the domain that I was like that account,
Yeah.
and then that there are no error messages, and they went, oh, okay, the Search Console,
So you sent that back to Google and then they
yeah,
then they
Google Ads,
So it's
yeah,
really quite funny because you think of Google as being like this big, giant, anonymous company, but there are actually people on the other side,
yeah, yeah,
doing things like that.
yeah, exactly. There's like, there's some parts where obviously they try to automate as much as possible because like at Google
Yeah.
scale, like you're just not gonna every little thing is not going to you're gonna need to have some automations. But yeah,
Right.
they're usually pretty good, and they
Yeah.
have steps in case to fix these kind of problems.
Yeah, that's true. All right. So what is our number five, Phelan?
So the last one is going to be submitting sitemaps. It's super
Yes.
useful to
Yeah.
business owner. Easy first step. Most plugins on your site, like Yoast, will generate them super easy, and you just submit it, and it's just a really easy way for you to get your website ranking really fast.
Yes. So instead of waiting, so what usually happens is Google will send out crawlers. The crawlers will end up finding your site. But as we know, there are so many sites up there. It does take a while. It can take up to 3 months for crawlers to find your site, is what I read at one point. If you submit your site map as soon as you've launched, usually these are the steps that I do when I'm doing sites.
Yeah,
Build
yeah,
the site, get the client approval on everything. Then I add the on-page SEO for everything, and then we submit the sitemap, and that really helps to get the site found and ranking much faster. So, and do you guys submit sitemaps to Bing also?
yeah. So what we do, we definitely submit them. So there's a like a Bing is a really funny one because they're like very much recognized that they are second fiddle to Google, and so pretty much
Yeah.
they have all these great features where you just import from Search Console, and so it's
Oh,
just
that's
yeah,
very handy. So, does Bing have their own Search Console version of
yeah,
Search Console? But
they
okay,
do.
I
It
don't,
is
I don't
called
know anything about Bing.
Yeah, yeah, it's called Bing Webmasters. It's actually pretty
Right.
good, honestly, for
Yeah.
an SEO tool. They have a couple of different features. It's definitely worth it if you're getting into SEO and you're really wanting to take a dive. Their tool's actually pretty good. I was impressed with it. Um,
And so what how many people are actually using Bing? Like I guess I know we submit sitemaps. I've only ever heard of people submitting sitemaps for Google and Bing, but there's also like other browsers. So what do we do with those? Do we submit sitemaps to other browsers?
or so it's That's a tricky one. Personally, I don't see anything past Google and Bing. Um, Even Bing, I don't say for every client.
Yeah.
Basically, with for Bing, if you're doing enterprise, you're doing like big B2B, definitely you should be looking at Bing because large
Okay.
organizations force their staff to
Oh,
only
yeah.
use Microsoft because that's secure.
Right. Oh,
So
I
they
never
have to use
even.
Bing.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes perfect sense actually. And then the only other browser that I really see people using a lot is Safari because it comes with the Apple computer. So what is up with Safari? How do they figure out their ranking system?
Uh, well, they're just the browser. They're not the search engine
Yeah.
who's doing the
So they
ranking.
yeah, that's true. So people still use Google when they're on Safari. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Okay. So there's no real. All right. And then there used to be one called Dogpile or something like that. Did that ever go anywhere? Because I think that was supposed to be a really secure.
The
Um,
only other one I could think of that's of note is DuckDuckGo would be
oh,
another one,
right. Right, right,
and
right.
they crib heavy from Google. So pretty much if you're doing
Right,
what Google does, they're going to
right.
be pretty much using the same kind of protocols. So a lot
Mhm.
of the stuff that you do for one site actually kind of works for like every site because they all kind of got
Yeah.
together and they make sure that like there's standards between all the search engines. So that's why schema
Oh, that's
exists
good.
is because they all agreed like rather than everyone has their own, we're just going to have one standard one and it's just simplified. So generally, if you do it for one, you're pretty much doing it for them all, whatever the best practices are because
Right.
there's like subtle differences, but for the majority, like they don't want you. There's no point in rewriting the rules every time. So
Yeah.
there's a lot more cooperation than people might think between them. Even the little guys and the big guys, like you know, Google and Firefox play pretty well together for
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. And so, but it's just generally yeah, just something to bear in mind is that you don't need to like do a whole special different strategy for Bing. You generally, if you're doing it well for Google, you're probably going to do well for Bing.
Yeah, that's good to know. But you can run ads separately on Bing and you want to submit your site map separately on Bing. So that sounds like good pieces of advice.
Yeah.
Um, Okay, so yeah, and I'm just trying to think of what else have I used Search Console because I'm pretty new to Search Console. Josh organizes the Search Consoles for all of my clients, and I don't really submit any sitemaps or do any of that type of stuff myself. I just know it needs to happen at a certain point before the
Yeah.
site is finished. Um, oh yeah, so okay, so when you go ahead and make changes to your site, since um, in Search Console, will they show you all of your 404?
Yeah. What they do is they'll show you. You generally have four sections, so there are four different statuses. So valid, which is everything's fine.
Mhm.
Excluded, meaning those are usually your admin pages that you don't want to have show up. Uh,
Right.
Valid with warnings, so that's your yellow, where they're like, you might want to take a look at this. This isn't quite how we expected it to be. And then error. And
Right.
generally, what they do is that your sitemap, they log it, and then if there's a differential, like they went to your services page and now it doesn't work, then they're going to be like, oh, this isn't working right now, and there'll be a big red bar, and
Right.
you'll see it pretty quickly, and they'll even identify the exact URL that it is, so there's no
Yeah.
guessing.
Oh, that's great. So the one thing that needs to happen to keep your console happy is making sure that when you get rid of pages or when there's a URL that changes, that you're creating your redirects so that
Yeah.
your traffic has a nice, smooth, and easy flow. You don't frustrate people by promising something in what is it, SERP or whatever they're called,
Yeah.
and then somebody clicks it and they get to a 404. Instead, even if that page is gone, you want to send them to similar type of content or somewhere else on your page that'll give them some similar answers to what they were querying, to
Yeah.
keep them on your site. Okay, cool. Um, wow. Well, we're just out of time now. Did you have any last minute thoughts, Phelan?
No, I think we kind of covered everything that I was going to go over,
Yeah.
and it's one of Pip and I our favorite tools to use is Search Console. Definitely, you're taking care of your website. It's definitely one to pay attention to.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so next week we're going to be back, and I'm just trying to look up what the. Do you have the thing opened? Um,
Uh, yeah, totally was prepared for that.
oh, good, because I am not. I thought I had it up, but I don't, which is not good.
Uh, it is going to be you and Pip talking about Google My Business and
Oh,
Localization.
yay. Okay, I know that's one of
Yeah,
Pip's favorites, and
yeah,
it's becoming my favorite too. Pip and I use it quite differently, but we both get good results with it. And
yeah,
we've been sharing our secrets back and forth. So we'll be getting some really good stuff out there because honestly, for organic work, it's like one of the most important assets to organize. And I think
yes.
it's one of the um, least interesting one for business owners. They don't go on there very often.
No.
Uh,
Well,
it
some
doesn't seem like a
there are
place
some
to.
that do, and those ones
Yeah,
that are our clients that use it like all the time, they get
yeah,
really good results with it, with getting
yes,
leads and getting people messaging
yes,
them and calling them and they're
yes,
responding to reviews, like
yeah,
all super important things that can be done with it. And so it's definitely
yeah.
well
It's
worth
going
it
to be
for,
a fun one.
yeah,
Yeah,
for sure, for sure.
be a
All right.
fun one. All right. Until next week, we are Geek Speak. What is this called? Geek Speak, and we are
Yeah.
in the Geek Speak Marketing Mixer Facebook group. If you're looking for where this streams live, replays get posted on lots of places. So come find us in the group, and have a great week.
You too. Bye.